The symposium. Archetypally, a symposium is about love. It's a feast where we meet to talk about love. Now, this is exactly what it is, so far from what I've heard. There is no way I'm not going to make a tiny contribution. My memory of Hannah goes all the way back to the day in 1984 when she walked into the classroom in what I think was a polka-dotted dress, a young presence, so earnest, so warm, considerate, so absorbing as a teacher. I tried to audit as many courses as I could. I don't think I ever wrote any paper for you, but that's what I'm known for doing. I think in an alternative world, what I would do is study Yiddish, if I get a chance. Okay, so now I'm going to present our first speaker. Stephanie Ginensky is a lecturer in the English departments of Seminar, Kibbutzim, and Talpiot College. She wrote her MA thesis on the autobiographical writings of Shalom Aleichem and Philip Roth, as well as her PhD thesis on the names in Jewish American literature, both under the supervision of Hannah Worth-Nesher. Although she currently teaches English literature and language, her research locates her between American and Jewish studies. And she's going to explain how her work with Hannah in the Yiddish Institute has influenced her research today. Her talk is entitled, as the good book says, Find Yourself a Teacher. Please, Stephanie.
Thank you, Anna, for that introduction. It's with the greatest pleasure and honor that I've been invited to speak today at today's conference in honor of Hannah, who's been not only my academic advisor, but so much more. I've had the honor of assisting Hannah on a number of projects, from her ISF research exploring the place of Hebrew and Yiddish in Jewish American literature, to the Poetics Today special volume on modern Yiddish literary studies, which Hannah guest edited, to compiling the annotated bibliography of recent scholarship in Yiddish studies, to the Posen Encyclopedia of Jewish Culture and Civilization, for which Hannah was on the advisory board and in charge of the English language literary selections, to the Cambridge History of Jewish American Literature, a mammoth, groundbreaking project conceived of and edited by Hannah, to a variety of other projects carried out in conjunction with the English Department and the Yiddish Institute at Tel Aviv University. In each project, I was exposed to Hannah's rigorous approach to scholarship, an admirable bordering on saintly, mensch-like diplomacy when it came to dealing with contributors, writers, editors, assistants, and publishers alike. My work with Hannah has been transformational, to say the least, and if I can say so in an academic setting, even magical from the outset, which brings me to the story about how I first found the person who, as it transpired, would change the very course of my academic life. It was shortly after studying classical Jewish text at the Pardes Institute for Jewish Studies in Jerusalem and modern Jewish literature at JTS in New York that I got married and moved to Israel, bringing with me a suitcase containing all of my Jewish books, including the Jerusalem Bible, a collection of stories called The Best of Shalom Aleichem, and some used Philip Roth books given to me by my father-in-law to complete my Jewish book education collection. There, strolling the streets of Jerusalem, I wondered, how do all of these Jewish books connect? What do they have in common? Then one day, in an alleyway off of Jaffa Road, I followed a sign which led me up a flight of stone stairs to the second floor of a historic Jerusalem building, where I entered an enchanting bookstore called Sefer V'Sefel. Perhaps you know it or have been there yourself. If so, you will know what I mean when I say that there were books everywhere, literally everywhere. But taking in the vast treasure trove before me, my eyes were immediately drawn to one single volume. A volume whose title articulated the very question which with which I had been consumed. What is Jewish literature? I picked up the book and excitedly flipped through it until I got to the back cover, where I discovered with great delight that the editor of the volume, Chana Worth-Nesher, not only lived in Israel, but at that time was the head of the English department at Tel Aviv University. Suddenly, despite my scholarly resistance to such things, a Tevye-inflected voice arose from my subconscious. Fairly certain, or hoping anyway, that the voice was coming not from Fiddler on the Roof, heaven forbid, directly from Shalom Aleichem's Tevye stories, which I had studied with Professor Roskis at JTS. I took heed as the voice offered the following words of wisdom. As the good book says, I have set this book before you. And as it also says, seek and thee shall find. Of course, my inner voice was somewhat cryptically urging me to contact Hannah, and was also referring to one of the most famous verses in Pirkei Avot, which contains the rabbinic injunction, Aseh lecha rav, usually translated as find for yourself a teacher. I knew my inner Tevye was right, and the moment I met Hannah, I knew that I had indeed found for myself a teacher. But the verse continues, V'kinei lecha chaver, acquire for yourself a friend, V'havei dan et kol ha'adam l'chaf zchut, and judge every person favorably. I want to start with the last part of the quote first, judge every person favorably, as it applies so readily to Chana, and in particular to her vision of Yiddish literary studies. What does it mean to judge? The Greek word for someone able to judge is kritikos, which gives us the root critic, and indeed, according to the Collins English Dictionary, a judge is someone qualified to comment critically. In academia, this might be understood as having the ability to judge the value of one's scholarly work by objective standards and conventions, but more so by possessing a depth and breadth of knowledge that affords one the unique position to form an opinion with wisdom, even if sometimes that means challenging established views and conventions. In her keynote address at the Yiddish Studies Conference at Hebrew University, Chana displayed such wisdom when she addressed the question of the future of Yiddish studies, which, as she noted, is at a critical crossroads. For one thing, she pointed out, the task of preservation and rescue, which motivated the field of post-war Yiddish studies, has been successfully realized by the archiving and digitalization efforts of institutions such as the National Yiddish Book Center, YIVO, and the National Library in Jerusalem. Moreover, she continued, the number of Yiddish speakers for whom Yiddish is a vernacular language is waning. And for this and other reasons, the enterprise of Yiddish literary scholarship is, to a large degree, taking place in the Yiddish language by a generation of scholars for whom Yiddish is not a native language and who have chosen Yiddish studies usually in a, quote, comparatist framework. As Chana put it, informed by other bodies of literature, languages, cultures, and perspectives, and aimed at a readership of literary theorists and comparatists. Rather than bemoaning what has been described as a, quote, fragmentation of the field based on fragmentary knowledge, Chana bravely and astutely envisioned a future for Yiddish studies based on linguistic competence, acquired perhaps in university programs such as the Yiddish summer program at Tel Aviv University, where I studied, thanks to Chana, and most of all, on innovative intellectual inquiry and approaches that integrate Yiddish text into larger research projects, employing concepts and methodologies from the humanities, such as post-colonial theory, gender studies, transnationalism, semiotics, Holocaust studies, and minority literature, to name a few. Indeed, my own research reflects Chana's concept of a comparatist methodology. My MA thesis, for example, written under Chana's supervision, was entitled Spinning Spiels of Self from Kraskolovka to Newark, a study of the journey traveled in the autobiographies of Shalom Alechem and Philip Roth. And my PhD dissertation, and these are the names, an onomastic approach to names in American Jewish literature, is a perfect example of the type of research that integrates Yiddish texts into larger research projects. As I discovered, a study of names in American Jewish literature necessitated not only understanding the American name narrative, but required extensive research into the field of Jewish onomastics, exploring the significance of names in biblical, rabbinic, and modern Jewish culture and text. My dissertation, therefore, contains a chapter devoted to names in modern Yiddish literature. On the one hand, specific attention was given to the phenomenon, explored at length by Dan Miron, of Yiddish authors such as Shalom Aleichem and Mendele Machel Sfarim, assuming pen names and authorial personas as folksy storytellers that would serve as a vehicle by which the modern Jewish author could negotiate a return of sorts to the Jewish community for which he was writing. I also explored how this notion manifested thematically and stylistically in these authors' works. When it came to American Jewish literature itself, I suggested that the origins of the American Jewish name narrative might be located in Shalom Aleichem's novel Matal, the Cantor's Son, whose name changing is portrayed both as a typical rite of assimilation, but at the same time as a continuation of the custom of having multiple names or nicknames, a tradition, by the way, that wreaked havoc for the Jews in the Russian Empire in their dealings with the state, as Shalom Aleichem wrote about in his Laughter Through Tears short story, The Draft. What fascinated me, however, was how the motif of name-changing in Matal could be interpreted differently in both a Jewish and an American context, representing both continuity and discontinuity at the same time, capturing the dialectic at the heart of the American Jewish experience. And this was true of other stories written in Yiddish as well, such as Leon Kobrin's short story, Jenny's Kol Nidre, or Friedel Stock's story, The Dance, which convey the spiritual and psychological effects of name-changing and assimilation on the individual and collective Jewish psyche, or neshama. Hannah has written about the onomastic drama surrounding the title of Abraham Kahn's novel Yekel, A Tale of the New York Ghetto, or Yankel der Yankee in Yiddish, which sensitized me to the significance of other literary onomastic choices of first and second generation American Jewish writers. While I might have initially hesitated and felt insecure about incorporating such Yiddish text into my dissertation, because after all, Yiddish literature is not really my field, what I came to realize was just how integral these Yiddish texts were to the story of names in American Jewish literature, and how integrating such text into my study resulted in my ability to give a less fragmented and more comprehensive account of the subject at hand. I can say, therefore, that it is because of Hannah's influence and her ability to judge favorably the integrity of new, quote, fragmented approaches to Yiddish literature that today I confidently bring Shalom Aleichem and Kobrin and Gladstein, along with other Yiddish authors, into my English language literature courses that I teach at Seminar HaKibbutzim and Talpiot College. On the one hand, because I believe such authors expand our understanding of the concept of modern and American literature, and on the other hand, perhaps out of a sense of imperative to participate in the preservation and rescue effort by transmitting Jewish cultural literacy to students who otherwise might not have access to such a body of literature, and trusting that even though I am offering them access only in English translation, although I do always try to put the Yiddish original on the Moodle, that they and their own research are nonetheless being enriched by the encounter. My ability to do so is directly a consequence of benefiting from Hannah's courage in asking a room full of Yiddishists, why are we afraid of fragmented knowledge? And her ability to judge favorably the contribution of comparatist and integrationist scholarship to the field of Yiddish studies. Of course, Hannah's influence on my work extends not only to Yiddish literature, but to Jewish American literature and American literature in general. I've had, my PhD dissertation, the subject, in fact, was influenced by Hannah's book, Call It English, which explored the role of Hebrew and Yiddish in Jewish American literature, and brought to mind the oft-quoted midrash that the Jews were redeemed from Egypt on account of keeping their names, language, and dress. Thinking about these elements and how they functioned as safeguards of Jewish identity through diaspora history inspired me to consider the role of names in Jewish American literature. When I told Hannah I wanted to explore the subject, she immediately approved, and then told me that there was an entire academic field devoted to the study of names called onomastics. Some months later, she sent me the call for papers for the International Jewish Names Conference, and since then I have presented at that conference, and I'm currently on the steering committee for the upcoming conference this summer. In addition, I've participated in several panels on Jewish American names, and have had my dissertation accepted for publication for by the Jewish Names series published by the University of Maryland Press. All this thanks to the doors that Chana has opened for me. In her work, Chana has asked all the burning questions which I have struggled with regard to defining Jewish literature, Jewish American literature, and how to talk about Yiddish literature and American Jewish literature in the same discourse, all the while suggesting that such categories may be indefinable and serve more of a heuristic function. Nonetheless, the search for a definition of Jewish literature is something that continues to occupy me, yet I no longer wander the streets of Jerusalem in search of salvation. Chana has given me tools to contain the indefinable within the boundaries of the definable. In many ways, our fields of inquiry overlap, which is not to say that Chana agrees with everything I have written. She does not necessarily share my quest for connections or continuity or big sweeping master narratives, but she has always judged the value of my work based on the soundness of my methodology and intellectual integrity. And in that sense, she fulfills the description found in Pirkei Avot of someone who judges favorably, which brings us to the next part of the Mishnah. V'kinei lecha chaver, find for yourself a friend. Someone who sees you, believes in you, trusts you, says what you need to hear, and supports you, even pushes you, or conversely knows when not to push you to achieve your potential. Someone who is generous in time, spirit, and guidance, and that, as we all know, is Chana. And finally, aseh lecha rav, find for yourself a teacher. We all know the importance of having a good teacher, someone who can transmit knowledge and wisdom. But the Hebrew, aseh lecha rav, in Pirkei Avot is grammatically ambiguous. If you change the inflection of the Mishnah slightly, the aphorism can be read, aseh lach rav, make yourself into a teacher. I would like to argue that, in fact, the two are closely related, because the best type of teacher is one who can turn you into a teacher yourself. So that the aphorism can be read, the teacher you find for yourself should be someone who helps you to become a person who can be a teacher to others. I think of Chana often in my role as lecturer and teacher. She is my role model and my inspiration. I aspire to her high level of academic, professional, and personal integrity. I aspire to emulate her kindness and generosity of spirit in sharing her knowledge with others, and her ability to judge favorably and know how to bring out the best potential in people. It's very rare to find all of these qualities in one person. But then again, Chana is that rare exception who transforms not only all the academic fields to which her work contributes, but all of us who have been so fortunate to have found for ourselves a teacher, friend, and visionary colleague all wrapped up in one. Chana, we look forward to continuing to learn from you and eagerly await the opportunity to be transformed by whatever project you next grace with your singular combination of erudition, dedication, and impassioned hard work. I think I speak for everyone present when I say, Chana zoltir gain, Michiel Elchiel, may you go from strength to strength.